Hello lovely people, welcome to today's review video. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. Before we begin, I want to humbly apologise for the atrocity behind me. It's, as I say pretty much whenever it's looking awful, which is near on all the time, my little home library is a work in progress. It's also like a bit of a storeroom of sorts, and I'm still going through things that are like packed away and yeah, having a bit of a rejig. So hopefully it's not too distracting. Let's get on to the video. I was buddy reading this book and it did take me a little while just because things popped up. I had other books that I needed to read and talk about for like book tours and things like that, so it kind of went on the back burner a little bit. However, I very much enjoyed this story. We are following Lennon Carter, whose life is falling apart. She gets a mysterious phone call inviting her to sit the entrance exam for somewhere very few have heard of. Hidden in a secret pocket of Savannah, it's a place called Drayton College and it's a school of magic. Lennon has been chosen because, like everyone at the school, she is special and can tap into certain powers that not everybody can. She possesses an innate gift in persuasion, and she will learn at the college to control others, manipulate, super rare cases, control matter itself. The rest of the blurb says, this is the Evernight exclusive edition by the way, this was October 2024. While persuasion takes a heavy toll on her body and mind, she is captivated by all that surrounds her. Her studies, the college's lush moss-draped campus, her brilliant classmates, but most of all, Dante, the charismatic advisor, both intimidates and intrigues her. However, as Lennon becomes more adept at using her uncanny abilities, so she uncovers more. About Drayton and its unsettling history, about Dante and his tragic and violent past, and the more she learns, the more disturbed she becomes by what she finds. For it seems that the ultimate test Lennon will face is to embrace absolute power without succumbing to corruption and darkness, a test she's terrified she's going to fail. So whilst I have you here, as I say, this is the gorgeous Evernight edition. I want to show you some of the features of this particular book because I think it is beautiful. So it looks like this, and it's kind of got like the mirroring of Drayton College, and it sort of covers around with this Ouroboros detailing on the back of the dust jacket. Inside we have a naked hardback, which is stunning. It shows these golden elevator doors, which are a very integral part of the story, against like these pillars. It's absolutely beautiful. The inside further still has some artwork of both Dante and Lennon, and so Lennon's here at the front. This is one of the earlier scenes in the book, and this is a little bit later in the book, but it's a really cool scene that happens and it's quite unsettling and quite frightening. And it also has some gorgeous sprayed edges, which carries on the kind of idea of the dust jacket design. Of course, this one has a signature by the author. I thought this was brilliant. Let me just say that straight away. I absolutely adored this story and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. This is the first book I've read by Alexis Henderson, and I will be going back and reading The Year of the Witching because that's one that was on my radar for a long time too, and I just never got around to it. But with the writing of this author, like the quality of it and how much, even though it took me such a long time to get into this, not get into the story, but to continue the story, every time I put it down I wanted to pick it back up, and it was so moorish and easy to fall back into, regardless of how much time had been since I last sat down and read it. So with that at the forefront, like, it really makes me want to pick up some more by Alexis Henderson. With An Academy for Liars, I feel like Henderson perfectly blends like this modern dark academia storytelling and speculative fiction with a timeless gothic atmosphere that classics so beautifully write. It just simultaneously crafts awful characters that you just can't help but root for, tragic backgrounds, beautiful rich prose, like everything is just so wonderfully entangled. As the story of Lennon and her journey with this art of persuasion develops, it really began to remind me of the peculiarities of The Magicians, specifically the TV show, because I've not read the Lev Grossman book that created the whole franchise, as well as Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, especially with the hallway and the doors mentioned earlier with the design under the dust jacket. That's quite a integral piece to the story, as well as reflecting back to the use of mirrors and how, like, thematically and stylistically they're used as a sort of foreshadowing almost to the story and how disturbing they are just on a surface level. It casts me back to the movie Us, which is another fantastic horror if you haven't watched it. All this to say, I felt like everything was blended together so well, with creepy, disturbing elements that I loved, but also carried out in a way that was entirely unique to itself, regardless of having little tidbits of information that I felt nodded at other works that I've really enjoyed. It just still felt very unique at the same time. A little bit about our main character, Lennon. She was such an interesting perspective to read from. She had so much trauma to unpack. Her coping mechanism isn't super healthy, to be honest. She opts to run away and bury it all rather than kind of deal with it then and there, or at a later stage where she's not in like flight or fight or freeze. But that's still super relatable because there's so many people, I would say, that has that thought process to kind of just bury it all away, right? And throw on top of this strange manipulative power that she didn't know was a thing, like in the sense of an actual power, then you've got quite a tumultuous individual within Lennon. However, in the halls of Drayton College, she sees herself as finally belonging, which was such a wonderful thing to see, especially when you learn how she kind of got to that point at being at the college and kind of her life beforehand and the relationship that she was in prior. But of course, this security, this safety, it doesn't last for long. The paranoia sets in, and the way it eats away at Lennon as her control, or lack thereof, of her powers grows is such a scary but like fascinating study of a fractured psyche. Henderson raised so many questions of morality with the themes of this novel, and it often left me scratching my head in deep thought and rereading passages to kind of really get it to sink in and be like, oh, whoa. Continuing on with characters and relationships, I felt like Lennon builds intense, uncomfortable and stretched relationships, which really reflects the personality that she has. And I think it was a really interesting way to explore friendships and romantic relations as something that's not super easy to connect and grow on, because Lennon as a person is not a super easy connectable individual, right? And understandably so. She's kind of had to go through life with a backbone that's made of steel, especially within like romantic relationships and kind of the advantage and the power dynamic there. In terms of atmosphere, I mentioned briefly how it kind of carries that beautiful classic gothic feel whilst being still very modern and speculative fictiony vibed. But the whole atmosphere of this in general was kind of tense. It had so much political intrigue and sort of like power play. It always felt like it was on the edge of a spiral, and I think that really helped with the type of character that Lennon is as well. I honestly loved this book so much. There was so much more to it than I was expecting going into it, but I really loved that it worked with horrible, morally inept or corrupt, complex characters, and it just did that so well. One of them, for example, was Dante. He had this kind of bad boy depth, very obviously taboo because of the sort of student teacher vibe. They're all of age, and they're like, it's like a university, and they're kind of like similar in age group, so it's not super far out in the taboo lineup, I guess you could say. But you really see Dante battling with like this interest that he has in Lennon, knowing that it's not completely like professional, you know, and not wanting, when you learn a bit more of his backstory as well, he's kind of not wanting to repeat situations that are all too familiar, right? So I think it is handled really well, and at the same time you've got Lennon being very headstrong and kind of almost coming out of her shell, because in the relationship that you see her in very early on in the beginning of the book, she's a complete different person. You know, she kind of molds herself around this light, this being of light, which is the partner at the time. And then when things go to shit, she's like, oh, okay, crap, new life now, right? I'm gonna live this for myself now. So here she's really like owning her sexuality, owning her sensuality, and being like, we are two consenting adults, and just being really headfast and headstrong with it. And I quite liked seeing that that duality within her and that growth as well. But on a level of just like professionalism, the way that Dante like affected the teaching and the learning of Lennon as a pupil was absolutely fascinating. Like, it was such a cool story, like, unfolding, to see the way that classes were structured and the topics that they would learn regarding this like persuasion, and it just felt so believable in some aspects, you know, which I absolutely loved. And I think that also helped with me being able to just fall back into the story regardless of how much time had passed since I'd last picked up and like dove into a chapter, right? Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm going to stop here. I recommend this if you love dark fantasy with academia vibes, a little bit of a forbidden romance, horror, because it's quite gory, I would say. Probably not for the... It's probably not super scary for the veterans of the horror world. Like, it's mild in a lot of ways, but it does have a healthy dose of like violence and fighting and gore, and yeah, I recommend this. I very much enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to picking up some more by this author. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. You've got to let me know if you've read this book yourself. If you've read anything else by Alexis Henderson, I would love to know. Thank you again for watching. I shall catch you in another video soon. Bye.